Hi, welcome to Gene Keys with Monifa, your path to vocal superpower. So, I'm starting this series for a few reasons. Number one is because I love the Gene Keys and I wanted to share it with my audience. And I wanted a place where I could also do the work that I need to do with the Gene Keys. I know my own personal profile pretty well, but, what I know about anything that has to do with energy charting and knowing your purpose is that all of the energies are just part of being human. And what we get to do when we first see our own personal profile is know what our own highlighted challenges and superpowers are and our points of genius. But when we get to really delve into the whole of the system, that sets up all of the archetypes that have been known throughout thousands of years for humanity and our lives and how we go about being and living together. Is that you gain such a great understanding for the world, and you also gain a huge sense of compassion and desire to be part of it. That's something that I get from doing so many different kinds of astrology, and why I chose Gene Keys is because it's amazing. Gene Keys is amazing. It gives you this beautiful template of your energy that shows you probably what has historically played out, especially early in your life, around the challenges of your energy. And then it shows you the genius behind that. And what it highlights especially is that there's nothing wrong, right? Your low vibe or shadow is what the Gene Keys calls it, way of showing up in your energy is just so that we can hone the skills that allow us to be a genius and a superpower in our specific kinds of energy. So never poo-poo your shadow. It's there to show you your path to your genius and your capability of being a superpower or powerful person. We are starting with the purpose sphere because it's the purpose. It's why you're here. It's what you're made of. It's how I see it. The gene keys are literally pointing to the DNA structure, the amino acid that is the energy that makes up your being this energy, right? And so like there's no better way to start really exploring, but if you want to do the full golden path, it actually starts in a different area, and takes you through an activation sequence, a Venus sequence, which is about relationships and love, and then a prosperity sequence. So I like to get people started just so they can see what it can look like by going to the vocal superpower chart. But there's a definitely a full gamut of what you can do. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you visit their website with my link. Each key has 3 levels. Okay, it has the shadow, which has a repressed energy expression side, and it has a reaction, a reactive energy side. I call it low vibe. And then the next level is the gift. So that's where your genius lies. When you are able to know your energy clearly and know the highest possibility for your energy, that's what the gift gives you. Then you are no longer willing to settle for that shadow, right? And so you're going to start your own cells are going to start working on changing whatever story you have to change in order to live out that genius and superpower. The third level is the city, SIDDHI. So, what that represents to me is the service to the world. And I see that in 2 lights. It's going to be a service to the world in the energy, right? Of how the energy serves the world with or without you. Like there's energy, we're all human, right? And so somebody else has something like that energy in them. And how that energy is serving the world is what the city is, and its highest expression, and it's fully uh, fully realized. I don't know another way to say that, but yeah, it's basically the best world, the best possible world and expression of the service of that energy. A quick caveat. This is how I'm presenting myself to a gene key at any given time. Every time I picked up a gene key, it means something a little different to me. I get a gem every time I do one, and each time I see something different, especially if I have somebody different in front of me, because that story may play out a little differently, and my intuition tends to pick up on that. But also, it's just a deeper exploration of what is, right? And so each time I feel like I get wiser, each time I revisit one of the keys, right? So what I want you to know is that you need to apply your own stories. That's what's going to make this extra special for you. The Gene Keys is not about just knowing your profile and somebody telling you what to do and you following what they said. The Gene Keys is positioned, Richard Rudd made it so that you will take your own stories and see how it's correlated in your life and be able to see your shadow playing out in the stories in your life and see the story of your genius that is becoming in the same stories, right? So you want to take this information and then think about it to yourself. Have I ever seen myself play this out? So even if you don't know your profile yet, you can already gain like great wisdom just because, again, all of this energy is within us. Just some are going to show up as stronger for you than others, right? You're just going to be one where you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that's my entire life right there, right? And that's probably going to be one of your purpose spheres. You only have one, but your purpose sphere. So, enjoy it. So, your signature vibration is something that happens when you are so attuned to your own energy. For me, it really happens when I'm highlighting one of my really prominent spheres and keys. And I do my practice. So I do a practice called Get Vocal, which allows you to really feel the vibrations of whatever you're concentrating on. So that can be within your body, that can be externally. But when you're concentrating on what makes you you, there's just kind of this really felt vibe that happens. I can't find another word for it because it's literal. I'm not making that up. You will feel it. You will feel it in your body. You'll feel it in your hands, your feet, your legs, your belly. And then when it's really prominent and when you get really resonant in that frequency, I call that your signature vibration. And life is so worth living in that space because it is why you're here. When you're resonating with the energy that you came to the world with, and it just gets brighter and louder in your own sphere. And so you don't have to worry about things like setting boundaries and even being so much, intention setting, which I know I focus a lot with my clients on because up until now, we haven't had this tool so at hand to really be able to purposefully delve into a specific energy that is set up for you and is you. And one of the things Richard likes to say is that some people ask, well, what does this key mean, right? This is something that you won't see him do a lot is just talk about the keys plainly. It's because he knows that if that's your key, if that's your sphere, then you know better than he does because you have the lived experience of being that energy, right? So he's like, well, you tell me, what is that? What does that feel like when da 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 da? And so remember that this is just a starting point, and this is just an invitation for you to go with me on my journey of knowing the keys better. So, key 22. To be honest with you, I thought I'd be able to avoid this key for a longer amount of time. But like most of my life, it's very obvious when something is up, and this is the time that it decided to show itself. This key is on my hologenetic profile, which is the Gene Key profile, in two places, in my attraction sphere and in my core vocation sphere. It is the key that I've spent the most time on trying to understand it, trying to understand how it's worked and impacted and continues to live in me and my life. And even when I first read it and understood the little bit that I could that first time, it was daunting. And yet it was so real for me. I knew that it was a large component of everything that has been a challenge for me in my life, and really what I'm here for, what I'm here to make spaces for and help other people too. So, all that said, key 22 is the shadow of dishonor, the gift of graciousness, and the city of grace. One of the reasons why this is such a big key in the Gene Keys is because it's the other half of the unfolding of this transmission, the whole of the Gene Keys that was given through Richard Rudd. Um, it impacts really how we are even getting the information to begin with, which is because there's this new stage in evolution of humanity. So there's two keys that he points out at the beginning of this chapter, which are 55, which is a key that talks about the process of awakening as a genetic evolution, and then the key 22, which is the process of awakening as an intervention of divinity coming into the body. And we can think of these two things. And if you've thought about or seen the kind of revolution of embodiment that's coming onto the planet, like it's kind of this understanding that the body is the centerpiece of our enlightenment, evolution, realization, self expression, a thousand different things, right? It comes along with the also kind of the revolution of our understanding of genetics and how we can influence our genetics through our thought and through our actions and how we are feeling. So all of this is coming down through this. This one key needs that as context to really begin to understand that this is where that mystery lies of spirit, mind, body, that all can be one and that we are all of those things, right? It also is in the mystery when he talks about mystery, it also for him directly relates to the sweetness of suffering. So we talked about this a little bit, I think in key 5, but it's a recurring it was a recurring theme because it's just the understanding that as we live our lives and things that feel bad and things that we wish would go a different way, all of that is on the way to us realizing the fullness of ourselves and living the beauty of life as well. It's kind of like that conversation where you can't know what the good stuff is if you've never known bad, where we need the differentiation in order for us to realize and be grateful for what the good parts are. And then we get to realize that we get to do that at any given time, that we can notice the good part at any given time, right? Another kind of the deepening of this understanding of the key is that it's connected to what Richard Rudd calls the law of divine memory, what a lot of people call Akashic records, but he describes it as a receiving dish that hears everything. It hears and receives all transmissions, actions, everything that and has happened and is happening in the universe. So what happens in the shadow is that we don't get to be in harmony, or we're not in harmony with what is already happening in that orchestration of everything. And how you receive your input from everything is determined by how you're attuned, or how he talks about how the strings are tuned either to the harmony of the universe or out of harmony with the universe. And so when you're out, then dishonor happens. It happens as humans because we often don't recognize that there is something that's recording everything. For many of us, it's like getting away with something. But I feel like, at least for me, this key is living in this way where I always knew that like nothing was hidden, you know? I'm wondering if other 22s feel that way. Like I've always felt that way. Some people call it God. I just knew that it was, right? Like that they weren't getting away with anything, whether somebody sees you possibly or not, right? I wasn't waiting for my mom to find out. I just knew that somehow something new. And so when you don't recognize that all of that is in harmony, you don't recognize that one action can cause a ripple effect that will come back to you. And so living in dishonor means that you're not honoring that truth that all things are connected. In this energy be highly passionate and highly sexual, and and those with the key 22 have huge emotional range, extreme highs, extreme lows, and even a sweetness, even early in my life, maybe more later. Like I think of my 18 to 24, around that time, like the extremes of my feelings, and how something that was truly like crushing to the point where I'd be in a little tight ball and just weeping uncontrollably, was still had a sense of sweetness to me, because there's nothing more alive than your biggest feelings, even the bad ones, which is why a lot of people get addicted to chasing them, whether they're good or bad. That's why we get our, what we call it, our vices from, right? So yeah, so even extreme lows, even unto violence, right? So having violent explosions is not uncommon for the key 22, and I can see, I've restricted myself. I'm more on the repressive side of this key, but still I have known the possibility for great violence and like passionate violence. And I could see that and feel that potential within me. And it just scared me. I didn't have the courage to live that. But I'm sure that, lived in another experience, that was a very real potential, right? And all emotions can be transmuted. So the thing is that with that huge range of possibility, that ability to transmute such a large exponent of energy is powerful. And how do we do that? Is by taking responsibility for our own feelings. So Richard Rudd talks about this in a few different ways, but it really is the beginning of living in harmony with each other in this world. I talk about it, that's something that I mentioned to my clients, and is that our emotions are always valid, right? And they're never anybody else's fault. And it's one of those things I had to learn for myself, because I was so extreme in emotion. And because I felt people's emotions so much, I was constantly blaming the person who caused the hurt. Right. And I grew up that way. And even into my adulthood, I was always the one saying, why can't you just be nicer? Why do we have to hurt people? And I was always blaming those that seemed to initiate that hurt. But as I became more empowered and I learned how to understand my own feelings, even early before I could even fully manage them, I was realizing there has to be a point where I have to take my own responsibility for emotion. And how much responsibility am I willing to take? And I know it's a hard thing, because, like I said, I came from the other side of this for sure. And where we get to work from is from our emotion and dealing with our emotion in and of ourselves, and letting that happen within ourselves without needing somebody else to transmute that energy into something powerful, positive, and world changing, right? And so that's what I hope for everybody. So there's a lot of different ways that we do this instead. So instead of taking on that responsibility We tend to project our negative emotions or anger at that hurt taking place. We just project whatever negative emotion we feel that others deserve because of what they have done. But when we do that and we cause more negativity or more hurtful emotions, then we are dishonoring that person that we are attempting to attack, kind of in that way, and then ourselves, because we are perpetrating something that we can transmute, right? And then there's also the subduing, where we try to get rid of or replace them with good feelings. I know how I grew up as said that, Christian, how Christians act, and they don't act from anger, and they didn't all this kind of stuff there. You end up acting like those emotions aren't happening. That's also a dishonoring of your emotion, right? Like, so you can be angry and you can accept that you're angry, and you can trust that there is a reason why you're angry without making that anger a tool of attack to somebody else. Even if they are hurt that you feel angry, that's their emotion, right? So it doesn't mean that that's your job. Like, it's not your job to fix people's emotions. Your job is to honor them. I get that you're hurt, that that I could be angry with something that you said, and this is how it shows up for me. So you can still talk about being angry without perpetrating anger. In other words, lashing out, cursing, all that kind of thing. I always say that if it happens that way at first, at least you're expressing yourself. If you've never expressed anger before, then sometimes you just need to get it out one way or another. And then you can evolve. Then you can come back to the drawing board, know how you live in that anger, and be able to show up in a way they can understand that you're angry without feeling that you don't no longer want to be their partner, their friend, their whatever, right? So it can be more directed once we've had that experience enough that we can live our emotion without losing control. You can really honor both sides of that, trying to fix and change your emotions. So again, this is kind of this idea even of modern spirituality, where where we're going to immediately transmute that into joy and love and goodness, and trying to fix the anger and make it joy. So this is also dishonoring, right? Because you don't have to fix anything, because nothing's wrong. All you have to do is accept the emotion and just be okay with it and let it flow. Emotions are moving, they will flow through you. So let it flow. You don't have to do anything to allow your emotions to flow through, because that's automatically how they work if we allow them. If we try to subdue them or fix them, then they might act out. But if you just allow the emotion to be, then it will actually move through naturally, and it'll want to move through naturally. This is why we get to the point where we want to create amazing things. This is true transmutation, looks like transforming things into art, into service, into our projects and visions of how we can improve the world. This is what a true transmutation looks like, so that we are not, again, waiting on somebody to make things better, but that we are allowing that to be the impetus of how we get to live our lives from there. And that is where that power lies. So when we don't take responsibility for all that emotion, if we aren't sitting with it and letting it flow through, and maybe even in a creative way that allows that power to live into something constructive and beautiful, what happens is that life, karma, akashic field just sends you back to that experience. And so the more that you are just saying, oh, no, like, I'll live this experience the one time. I'm okay with this. I trust this experience. I think that's a big part of it, is the trust, that if you can trust your emotions, then you can trust yourself. If you make your emotions wrong, especially the negative ones, then you're making yourself wrong, and it becomes something that gets into a deeper, even more hidden emotion like shame and guilt. And we'll talk more about that later. So on the repressive side of this, the shadow of dishonor, it looks like proper, or being proper. By all appearances, that person looks strong, capable. They look like they have their emotions under control, and they are pristine externally. Anybody that sees them would see them as having it together, right? And yet that's a falsehood. They don't feel the emotions that they're showing. And so when that happens, then the that's because there's a fear. It's a fear of losing control of those emotions because they're so big, because they're so powerful. They're more than they feel they could possibly handle. And so they tamp them down and then put this appearance of proper action in front of it. Definitely more my version. So I can have a complete whole moment within myself and never show it. And so it makes me really good in emergency situations, but it can be highly disruptive to my own body, which is why I've had some of my lived experiences, is because I repressed a lot of that, and then my body just didn't like that. And then it can also work the other way, where you allow those feelings to be and flow as they are. But in reactive, it's inappropriate. People don't even try to control the emotion and the emotional reactions. It's just out. It can be disproportional to even what's happening. It's passionate, and it can even be destructive. The people that live in reactive often have extreme creative power because it's so explosive that if they can manage to transmute it, that it turns into amazing art and prolific art often. A lot of people that are in the reactive have a hard time handling their own passion, and therefore respecting others' feelings, respecting how people are receiving that passion, an inability to even listen or understand or take in what's happening to that other person while they're living the passion that they are expressing. I almost always experience both the repressive and the reactive side. And so what happens is I just didn't have a lot of experience with the reactive because I seem to just tamp down from a very young age. But until I met my husband. And then all of a sudden, my reactions were explosive, and I didn't feel like I was in control of those reactions. And they got to the point where often they were disrespectful because I just didn't even notice what I was doing, much less how it was being received by him and others. And so, again, that passion, that emotional range being a possibility for us all, right? That we don't hide behind our own experiences of being able to keep it all together. The repressive and the reactive are shadows, and the possibility and the gift is graciousness. So when we are living the gift as graciousness, we're considering the feelings of others while honoring our own feelings. And we're listening within while we respond. So we're not ignoring our own feelings and how we feel, and we're not disengaging from the conversation or trying to act like nothing's wrong or that there's nothing more to be said, done, experienced. So this, when you can live in that listening and responding, it's extremely powerful, and especially on the effect of others, because now people are feeling heard, and you're able to touch people's feelings in the height and the range that you can experience them yourself. And now you're having a whole and expansive moment with that person in the honesty of each other's emotions. And it's a really validating, really powerful experience for both parties, right? So deeply touching hearts and even souls with your connection with their feelings. And the others is also possible, right? So in the shadow, leaving people feeling utterly dishonored, right? If you're listening enough to be able to tell how how something can affect somebody in the biggest disruption, right? You can leave somebody feeling highly disturbed as well in the shadow. But on the gift side, you can also hold that capacity for people to feel their feelings at the deepest level and then become free of those feelings. And so you get to actually be in the space and take a negatively charged emotion, a deep and highly ranged, so like maybe their deepest, one of their deepest negative experiences, and help people come to that experience and become free of that experience and find their own empowerment through releasing that experience. That experience can be elevated to even beyond the normal ranges of love, of laughter, of tears. Because when we feel completely and deeply, we can also live in that full experience. What I find with this gift in my experience is that it leaves me feeling extremely vulnerable. So even making this broadcast, I'm feeling extremely vulnerable because this is so real and so much of the contention of the pain experiences, my challenges, my suffering that's happened in my life. So if you are not being accountable to your emotions and you're not allowing the input of others' emotions, we are disconnecting from that interconnectedness, that akasha, that is part of how all things are reflected and karma is returned. And when you are acknowledging, we can not just clear our own karma that is allowing that experience, but we can start in that gift to clear the karma of generations, of our ancestral lineage, of our spiritual lineage, of it all. So you can transmute the suffering and the karma of your whole ancestral line. I'd like to share with you a quote from the book directly. Living the gift of graciousness, your life can be filled with art, music, romance, deep relationships, and enchantment. But above all else, this is the gift of living life from a place of deep love and soul. The city is grace. And again, it is hard to explain because you have to experience it to know what it is. When I read that sentence in the book, I was like, Musa, right? For me, it was reflective of my entire work because I often think this and I often say this when I've gotten to the end of the rope, when I'm trying to explain what I do with voice and the work that I do in my studio, because the whole point of my work is to experience the thing. If you experience it, then I don't have to explain it because you've lived it. And that's what grace is. Grace is unexplainable unless you've lived it. Because it's back to this idea that our suffering is leading to something beautiful, and that a lived experience of suffering with faith leads to a grace. And grace lived, it's no longer faith, it's no longer belief, it's knowing. You don't have to believe in something you know. And that's what I hope for most people, because we're always trying to act the part, right? We have this idea that, fake it till you make it. And while I understand where that comes from, I also know that just being where you are, how you are, is the most powerful place you can come from. And you can't make a better impact than that. You can't make a bigger impact than that. And your most important work and purpose in the world comes from that place. So we can come from a knowing place because we are already there. We can come from presence, and everything that we are willing to admit to and be vulnerable to is right there. And that vulnerability is the power that is potential for that experience. So, yeah, suffering leads to knowing. Suffering leads to knowing. It leads to having an experience to know that you can make it to the other side and to know that you are more than that experience and that you can know that you have an internal power that got you through it and that is going to make something beautiful out of it. So one of the reasons why this is extremely daunting for Key is because it's huge. It's in the book, it's a full hour. It looks like it's going to be a full almost that for here, because I'm going to go briefly through the different sections that are also written into this key that are kind of explained throughout the key. And because it's part of the whole reason Gene Keys is, and part of one of the major transmissions of the Gene Keys called the Venus sequence, and we'll talk a very little bit about that. So one of the transmissions that comes through in this chapter is about the three pure ones: Hermes Trismegistus, Thoth, Christ, and then Buddha, the Trinity of divine will, love, and wisdom, and the Cosmic Mother. The Great Mother holds the master key to all suffering and stands behind the teaching in its entirety. And it's the triple mystery of the transmission of grace through suffering. So again, like I'm going to leave it there because I want you to go ahead and find out for yourself. This information is powerful. So if that entices you, go and learn more. Right? Go get the key, the Gene Key book, and learn more. The Corpus Christi is also in this. So the seven sacred bodies of humanity. Again, I'll go through those briefly. The seven sacred bodies of humanity being 1 physical, 2 astral, 3 mental, 4 causal, 5 buddhic, 6 atmic, 7 monadic. In the book, he'll go through and explain those 7 sacred bodies to you. You might also know them as kind of the auric field, the 7 layers of the auric field. The auric field being one of the layers, but our body, starting with our body and then outward. And then the next part that shows up in this chapter is the Bardo state. So the states of the different density of our being after death. So again, this sense of everything always being part of the universal fabric of that memory. And then the Venus sequence, which is essentially how we take our lived experience and relationships on the planet and become the evolution of that experience and transmute that into the gifts and the newness that is coming next for the world. So this is about the 6 core wounds of humanity that's contained in the Venus sequence. So the first one is repression, the second is denial, the third is shame, the fourth is rejection, the fifth is guilt, and the sixth is separation. So I talked about this in my group a little bit because the reality is that these 6 core wounds are often hidden. And so you might have heard of this in like shame and guilt, right? Where we will not really notice shame or guilt. We'll notice the results. We'll notice our avoidance. We'll notice that we're angry. We'll notice that we're depressed, right? We'll notice when we move past these emotions, but we don't normally notice them in and of the moment. Like, what am I feeling right now? I'm feeling angry. Why are you angry? Because I feel like I should be ashamed of how I think, feel, am. There's usually another layer behind most of our emotions, negative emotions, and that layer is one of these six. So when we kind of can sit down with them, then we have a better understanding of what's truly in the way and what are truly our stories behind what comes up for us when we're working to show up and be in our fullness as human beings on the planet. It is something that comes up and something I talk about in the Get Vocal group. We're trying to get vocal for our visions and our businesses. So the next part in the city of grace, is the seven seals. So the seven sacred seals and their respective cities. So each sacred seal is connected to one of the keys as well. So I'm going to go briefly through that. The first seal is the city of divine will, which is the 40th key. The second seal is the omniscience, which is the 17th key. The third seal is universal love, which is the 25th key. The fourth seal is epiphany, which is the 43rd key. The fifth seal is forgiveness, which is the fourth key. The sixth seal is truth, which is the 63rd key. And the seventh seal is grace, which is the key that we are in, the 22nd key. What's really beautiful about this and the timing, that I had already decided that I was going to do this video next when I got an email from the Gene Keys company saying that they are re-releasing the 7 Sacred Seals. That course is now being released, and so if you want to know more about the entirety of this transmission and how it talks about the 7 Sacred Seals and how you can live that experience of the divine coming into your body, of essentially enlightenment. There's nothing closer to that experience than sitting with these keys and really finding the place in you that knows. So breathing with them, using our voice with them. That's why I do the vocal contemplation, right? So that we can be with them in an even bigger way. The next thing that's in the chapter for Key 22 is the 9 portals of planetary initiation, which are birth, baptism, confirmation, matrimony, annunciation, communion, ordination, sanctification, and glorification. So you might recognize those, right? So again, these are things that he goes into depth with in the book, The Gene Keys. And so this is one of the reasons I recommend go ahead and getting the book, because you get that profile for free, and then you can look up your keys in the book. And then for keys like this, where you really want to go to whether you have or not, right? It's going to tell you so much about how the transmission ties together with itself, why it's so different, because and I'll do some videos on this as well, like why this transmission is so different than what we call astrology in so many different ways, even though it is coming from some of the same energetic information, right? So line 4 is coming from our activation sequence with breath and rhythm, and is reflective of the respiratory system. And then in the Venus sequence, shows up as a shadow of politician and the gift of nurturer. So in the 4th line, this is again about breath and its ability to bring us into harmony. And it's about deeper sense of life and life's rhythm. Because as we breathe, it's a natural rhythm. Breath also brings us into a true sense of unity, because everyone breathes air, and we're breathing everybody's air. That carbon dioxide that got sent out to the plant, that gets released back to us from the person that lived here how many years ago from that amazingly old tree, and or water that is brought in from the rain clouds that traveled across the face of the planet and now has has become water vapor that we breathe in. So we are connected through our breath, and when we're truly present to that, we feel the unity of that. And for the fourth line purpose, that is how your reassertion of life, how you reconnect and feel vital, is through breath. So if you haven't started breath work yet, do find some breath work practices and do them, because they will change your life. They will anchor you in yourself. And also, if you think about your purpose key while you're doing your breath work, it's going to give you such a sense of vitality and liveliness that there's nothing like it. Absolutely nothing like it. And I like to take it to the next step because I'm a line five, and voice that. And to me, that's my way of anchoring in. And it's also how I help people to realize what that experience of creation from breath to voice feels like, and get to know their own creative cycles within themselves. So for you to have that experience of breath, it's going to bring you into a sense of purposefulness and your core stability that comes from interconnectedness with everybody, your ability to connect through friendship and service. So beautiful. And so in the politician, which is the shadow expressing in the Venus sequence, is on the repressive side, is about being emotionally numb, and in the reactive side is cutting people off in a cruel way. And the main thing that comes up is that you want to reject others before they can reject you. So this is, again, for me, this is in my core and vocation, and that is where our human core wounding comes up, right? And so that's often what comes up for me when I'm trying to express myself, is that I'll reject something before I can feel the pain or suffering of somebody rejecting it from me, or even the feeling of failure for me is what comes up. The feeling that I will or can fail if I try to act. So there's that part. And then the nurture is the gift. So then the strength of the nurture is being gentle with yourself, and the strength outwardly in connecting deeply with others. And the highest potential of this gift of being a nurturer is that your generous spirit enables others to accept themselves. The nature of the line four is really that you're always feeling connected to everybody. So you are everybody's friend. You're when you get into the room, whether you know them or not, they're friends or potential friends. That's how you see that room. And it can also be hurtful if you feel like somebody's rejecting you as a friend because you already see them as a friend. And so, and maybe that experience you have in the past cut people off or restricted how you are around other people, and like started to maybe even be suspicious of people. Are they going to be my friend for real? Let me see if they're going to act friendly first, or if they're going to reciprocate my friendship first before I'm really friendly with them. It becomes this ability to numb your emotions until you feel safe. And so when you feel safe and you're no longer afraid of that as a possibility, then you move forward into your usual and normal friendliness. This again is something I relate to so much because it's something that I definitely grew up with, and just this ability to cut off my feelings until I felt that I was in a good place or in the right place, or this was somebody that I actually wanted to know even more. I'm always curious about people, so that's my first inclination. But if I'm in my shadow, then I don't want to interact, and then so it might even feel like rejection before I've made that decision. So nowadays, I do my best to trust, to come from my place of trust and then pull it back if it's not being welcomed or reciprocated. But until then, to show up as much as possible. So the way that the line 4 expresses through 22, key 22, is really about the expression of grace and that it can be in the air. How this expresses for me is that it's not really even in the speaking that a lot of that change, connection with others, understanding, feeling understood. A lot of that doesn't happen in the saidness of things and saying the right things, saying the right words. It happens in the space and in the breath and us being in that spaciousness and breath together. And so, yes, so it's really about being with others in a natural sense of communion and how it wants to express in purpose is instead of worrying about being rejected, about our emotions not being accepted for what they are in the naturalness of who we are being, that we are trying to reject others instead. And so not listening or not tuning into who they are and how they're feeling purposefully. So we are not the first to feel that. So, and then that's, more of the politician tends to, in that shadow, want to live through that dishonoring, right? So, not really listening, but playing off of the emotions that they assume to be there, maybe even in the shadow of that properness, right? Of saying, oh, perfect, that I don't have the problems you have, but I will sympathize with you and then manipulating that emotion that is universal, that but not acknowledging your own and not honoring how you're truly feeling in that moment, it becomes a more of a disconnection and breeds distrust instead of trust, and trusting yourself and trusting that your emotions are right for now and that you can live in the presence of those emotions and still honor others' emotions. So, and the nurturing side, really being gentle with yourself and knowing that if you feel like the emotion might be more than the situation can handle and or maybe is perceived as warranted in that time, that you would still trust that it's right, that you would trust that it's right, be gentle yourself in the moment, and then extend that humanity and grace and graciousness to the other person as well. So allowing them to be on that ride with you and inviting them through even just presence and breath and being there, and then any action coming from there instead of this contrived way of trying to connect to people without the truth of where you're really at in this moment. And now I'll do a vocal contemplation of key 22.